Never had there been such an unconventional noble lady. At 26, Haryung was still unmarried, making her the old maiden among the aristocracy. While the other young ladies diligently studied proper etiquette, she secretly attended the lecture hall to listen to discussions about fertility. One day, the teacher asked, "At what time is conception most likely to succeed?" The youngest girl could not answer and passed the question to Haryung. Just then, another girl tried to respond, but the teacher unexpectedly called on Haryung. After some thought, she gave the correct date. Though she answered correctly, the teacher criticized her for being too bold. Haryung merely pretended to agree. In the next class, she simply muddled through. At night, Haryung secretly read novels aloud to wealthy noblewomen. In Hanyang City, everyone adored the works of the writer Mei Hua. As soon as her books were published, the streets and alleys would be crowded with eager readers. But Haryung disliked Mei Hua's novels. One day, after reading a book for half a month to a noblewoman, she deliberately changed the ending, rewriting the fate of the male protagonist. The listeners were displeased, and the madam, furious, threw Haryung out. Having lost her reading fee, Haryung, out of spite, sneaked to the nobleman's residence and loudly mocked the novel. The next day, she went to a bookstore and begged the owner to help her find work again. But the owner, busy with the release of Mei Hua's new book, had no time for her. Annoyed by her persistence, he scolded her, "Last time I introduced you to the madam, you offended her and nearly got me killed. Do you know how terrifying her curses were?" In the end, under Haryung's relentless pleading, the owner relented. "If you still want reading work, then study this new book by Mei Hua properly." At that moment, the second prince, Rim, secretly slipped out of the palace and arrived at the bookstore. He was delighted to see readers leaving messages of encouragement for the author. But when he looked down, he noticed Haryung engrossed in a book. Time seemed to stop. Adjusting his robes, he confidently prepared to approach her, but just as he did, Haryung yawned. "This is so boring. I'm falling asleep." Puzzled, Rim asked why she disliked Mei Hua's works. Haryung replied, "These brainless novels are everywhere. Whoever wrote them must have no conscience. He should stop writing altogether." Rim was stunned. She had just insulted the novels he himself had painstakingly written. Unable to accept this, he followed her out of the bookstore and stopped her, pressing her again. "Why do you dismiss Mei Hua, whom everyone loves, as worthless?" Haryung shot back. "Unless you're Mei Hua himself?" Afraid of being exposed, Rim froze, allowing Haryung to leave arrogantly. But soon, the bookstore owner and an official conspired to make Haryung impersonate Mei Hua at a book signing. She refused, but the official produced a debt contract, forcing her to comply. That evening, dressed as Mei Hua, she attended the book reading. Just as she was calling the next fan forward, Rim suddenly appeared. "Mei Hua, sign for me." Recognizing him, Haryung tried to cover her face, but Rim saw through her disguise. Her identity exposed, she had to apologize to the readers. Furious at being tricked, the crowd demanded answers, and Haryung pointed directly at Rim. "He is the real Mei Hua." The readers were dumbfounded, but before the situation could settle, soldiers stormed in, ordered to arrest Mei Hua and confiscate her books. In the chaos, Haryung shoved Rim forward, and he was taken away. Thrown into prison, Rim was asked for his identification. He claimed he had none, and the constables grew suspicious. Could he be the son of a high-ranking official? Just as they probed further, his personal eunuch arrived, identifying him as the second prince. All of Mei Hua's works were ordered to be burned, denounced as corrupting morals and disturbing society. The king, furious, punished his son, confiscated his writing materials, and placed him under confinement. Meanwhile, Haryung's family delivered an ultimatum. Her marriage was settled, and she must prepare to wed. At last, the 26-year-old old maiden was about to marry. But at the last moment, the groom hesitated. Under pressure from his parents, he fled. At the same time, with her maid's help, Haryung also slipped out the back door. Haryung had always harbored the ambitions of a man. She had no desire to be confined in the women's quarters, scheming endlessly against others. On the eve of her wedding, she sought out her fiancé and begged him to break off the marriage. Moved by her tearful plea, the young man agreed. Escaping from the wedding, Haryung made her way to the women's examination hall. The crown prince, who was acting as regent, had decided to record the affairs of the royal harem and, in an unprecedented move, ordered an examination to select female historians. Inside the hall, cheating of every kind flourished. When almost everyone had begun to submit their papers, Haryung finally started writing. In order to select the most talented candidates, the crown prince personally reviewed the answer sheets. After scanning several, he remarked that some had clearly been copied, exposing corruption among the examiners. He then ordered the historians to recommend one promising paper. Despite objections from the officials, he reviewed it carefully. Before long, the results were announced. Haryung's name was listed first. Though she was ranked at the top, confusion arose when her name appeared in a peculiar order. Soon after, she was summoned before the crown prince. After an intense exchange with him, she left trembling, convinced she had no chance. Yet when the final list was revealed, Haryung's name was among the chosen four, though the highest honor went to the daughter of an influential official. The crown prince personally issued appointment letters to the four women. The top scholar, whether by accident or intent, brushed the prince's hand as she accepted hers. Haryung, delighted to be officially appointed, did not realize that Irim, the second prince whom she had betrayed, was plotting revenge. Irim used the crown prince's invitation to a hot spring outing as cover to confront the bookstore owner who had betrayed him. His eunuch prepared false accusations, while the bookstore owner fought back ferociously, even knocking out the eunuch's teeth. When Irim tried to intervene, the situation turned comical. His loyal eunuch, bleeding from the nose, insisted the bookseller had committed a capital crime. Cornered, the bookseller finally confessed that it was a woman who had betrayed Irim. Her name was revealed as Haryung. Meanwhile, after returning from studies in Qing, Haryung officially became Joseon's first female historian. The next day, she and the three other successful candidates arrived to begin work. Misled by unhelpful colleagues, they wandered to the wrong office before finally finding their way to the medical archives. Instead of welcoming them, the male officials mocked and belittled them, insisting that women should marry early and raise children rather than pursue such work. They were ordered to serve tea, fetch water, and perform menial tasks. At lunchtime, they had to watch their colleagues eat without being offered a single bite. One even forced them to pick up dropped tofu from the floor. Frustrated, the four women realized they were being rejected because they had not undergone the traditional initiation ritual, the Myeonsimrai, a humiliating ceremony designed to test newcomers' obedience. With no choice, they agreed to hold the ritual. Their colleagues ridiculed them for it. That night, the men deliberately made things difficult, insisting they drink from large bowls instead of cups. When one woman nearly collapsed after 2 bowls, Haryung boldly seized the third, downed it in one gulp, and then challenged the troublemakers directly to a drinking contest. As it turned out, Haryung, despite being labeled an old maid, had 2 great loves in life: sleeping in and drinking. Before long, she had drunk all her opponents under the table, earning the grudging respect of her peers. Elsewhere, Irim once again sneaked out of the palace, intent on confronting Haryung. He waited all night by the bridge, but she never appeared. His eunuch teased him mercilessly, saying he looked like a lover abandoned at a rendezvous. The next day, Haryung was stopped at the palace gate. With the help of a kind guard, she snuck in through a dog hole by the green pavilion wall. Knowing she had entered a forbidden area, she crept carefully through the grounds, unaware someone was following behind. When she turned, she was startled to see Rim, and both of them, equally shocked, blurted out each other's nicknames. Haryung, recognizing the man who had been seeking her for days, Rim tried to intimidate her, but she refused to be cowed and turned to leave. For the first time in his life, Rim's heart raced wildly. This woman's defiance shook him. To cover his unease, he brought up their old grudges, sparking yet another clash between the two. The awkwardness deepened until Rim's personal eunuch suddenly arrived with attendants. Learning that Haryung had been the one impersonating Meihua, the eunuch, afraid she might continue entangling herself with his master, quickly dragged her away under the pretense of sending her to the office of royal decrees. Once outside, however, he simply pointed her in that direction and let her go. When Rim discovered this, he was furious. "Why did you let my enemy slip away when she was right in front of you?" he demanded. But the eunuch calmly replied, "I was protecting you. If that big-mouthed woman were to learn your true identity, the whole kingdom would know the second prince is Meihua. Wouldn't you fear the king's wrath?" Back at the Office of Records, Haryung was called aside by a colleague who mentioned the favor she had done the night before. She brushed it off politely, saying it was nothing. To her surprise, the colleague snapped at her for meddling, warning her not to act so self-important again. Haryung tried not to care, unaware that an even greater humiliation awaited her. Just as she and the other 3 women historians were preparing for their duties, they were intercepted by a court lady and ordered to follow her to the Dabi, Queen Dowager. Nervous, the 4 entered the hall only to find the Dabi herself speaking with gentle warmth, encouraging them to serve the country faithfully. Relieved, they left the chamber whispering about her kindness. But outside, the court lady suddenly commanded the palace maids to seize them. When Haryung asked why, she was struck hard across the face. With cold malice, the court lady sneered, "Today you will learn the rules of the inner court." The 4 young women were beaten cruelly and warned never to think that becoming historians made them equal to men. "As long as you remain in this palace, you are women of the royal household," she spat. "You must forget everything you see and hear, have no eyes, no heart, obey the Queen Dowager, and nothing else." When one dared to protest, the court lady brought out a red-hot branding iron, intending to scar Haryung's face. At the last moment, male historians led by Byung-gyo burst in to intervene. When Byung-gyo demanded an explanation, the court lady mocked him. "Since when do men with pens have a say in the affairs of the inner court?" But under Byung-gyo's pressure, she reluctantly allowed the women to be taken back. On the way out, Haryung worried for Byung-gyo, who had stayed behind, but her colleagues scolded her. "Why follow strangers so blindly? Even a dog knows not to trail after anyone it doesn't recognize. As historians, our role is too sensitive." Later, Byung-gyo began personally teaching the women how to be historians. The next day, he even brought them to court to observe politics firsthand. The ministers erupted in outrage at the sight of women in the throne hall. "How dare women appear here? Get them out immediately," they shouted. But Byung-gyo ignored them, calmly instructing the women where historians should stand. Furious, the ministers continued to protest that this was no place for women. Byung-gyo dismissed them bluntly, and soon the session began. The women struggled to keep up, scribbling furiously. Back at the office, their poor notes drew laughter. When Byung-gyo reviewed them, he realized how hard it had been for them even to recognize a single name. Curious, the women asked how historians could possibly memorize every official. Byung-gyo handed them a book detailing the appearances and ranks of each one. He explained that historians not only recorded politics, but also documented the daily lives of the royal family. The next day, Haryung entered the Green Pavilion and nervously greeted the second prince. Suddenly, a man appeared beside him, claiming to be his eunuch. Every time Haryung asked a question, the eunuch answered in Rim's voice. At last, Rim seized the chance to mock her, tricking her at every turn until she was flustered and furious. While working under his orders, she took out her frustration on him, even stomping on his foot before leaving. That night, Haryung followed her senior to observe an autopsy. She noticed suspicious details and wanted to examine the corpse again, but her senior refused. On the way back, she slipped away and hurried to the morgue, only to spot a familiar figure. Seeing her friend being held hostage, Haryung grabbed a stick and rushed forward to help. But she froze when she overheard him revealing his true identity. He was a prince of Joseon. She hesitated, and in that instant Rim managed to escape serious harm. Haryung hurried to his side, only to watch the once proud prince suddenly collapse. A physician examined him and declared it was nothing more than qi deficiency. His hands showed no sign of labor. Clearly, he was a young nobleman. Looking at Rim's delicate features, Haryung couldn't help recalling the words she had just overheard. When Rim awoke, he avoided her questions and left in silence. The next day, determined to confirm his identity, Haryung went to the archives to check the royal registry. She found records of many princes, but when she turned to the page of the second prince, it was left completely blank. Her curiosity deepened. Just who was this man she had come to know as Mei Hua? She asked her colleagues why that entry was empty. One woman gave her a strange look and explained, "Don't you know? The second prince was said to suffer from severe mania since childhood. They say he often lashed out at court maids, and his body is covered in boils." Haeryung nearly dropped her jaw in shock. Before she could recover, she was assigned to record the second prince's daily life. Forced to visit the Green Pavilion, she met Rim face to face. Knowing he could no longer hide, Rim revealed himself. Their eyes met, and both were overcome with unspoken emotions. Remembering all the times she had unknowingly insulted him, Haeryung felt a prickle of dread. When the day's duties ended, she tried to slip away, but Rim stopped her. Expecting scolding, she braced herself, but instead Rim thanked her for staying by his side the night before and apologized for concealing his identity. Back at the office, her colleagues were stunned to see her return unharmed. Taking the chance, Haeryung defended Rim's reputation, slowly easing some of the rumors surrounding him. From that day, Rim fell into a lovesick daze. He spent hours staring at flowers, murmuring to himself. After only 3 days without seeing Haeryung, he grew restless and anxious, even sneaking out in disguise to perch on the pavilion wall just to catch a glimpse of her. When he finally saw her again, he grinned like a foolish boy. At the Green Pavilion, Rim tried to act composed, waiting for her to speak first. But when silence dragged on, he began teasing her instead. Sensing her foul mood, he awkwardly gave up his own chamber to her for the night. Hearing Haeryung cry inside, Rim found himself deeply moved. That evening, he went to the Office of Records and saw her asleep at her desk, tear-stained and exhausted. Quietly, he finished her work for her. To protect her from bullying, Rim even began helping with menial tasks, passing himself off as a low-ranking assistant. To keep his secret, Haeryung played along, though often frustrated by his clumsiness. When Rim risked speaking out of turn, she stuffed food in his mouth to silence him. One late night, after working too long, they found the palace gates closed. To avoid suspicion, they pretended to be a young couple lingering outside their home. But even after the guards passed, Rim refused to let go of her hand. With no way back to the palace, Haeryung took him home. Her maid was scandalized to see her mistress bringing back a man. Claiming the other rooms were full of drying gourds, she offered only Haeryung's chamber. Though awkward, Rim ultimately slept outside the door, yet both of them thought only of each other throughout the night. The following day, Rim began writing a heartfelt letter to Haeryung, intending to give it to her. But just as she reached for it, he lost his nerve and hid it behind his back. Amused, she tried to snatch it, but before she could, Rim's eunuch Sambo barged in. Both froze in embarrassment. Soon after, the king himself arrived at the Green Pavilion, a rare occurrence. Uneasy, Rim greeted his father. The king, having just quarreled with the crown prince over relief efforts for a plague outbreak, now declared that Rim would be sent to Pyongyang. Though Rim had neither power nor experience, the king ordered it without mercy. Back at the office, Haeryung overheard the discussion of who would accompany the second prince. None of the historians volunteered. Worried for Rim, she raised her hand, claiming she had survived smallpox. When the Queen Dowager learned her grandson was being sent to the epidemic zone, she stormed into the throne hall to protest. The king remained unmoved. Furious, she ordered the court lady to secretly arrange guards to protect Rim, but this plot was overheard and passed to the left state councillor. Before his departure, the crown prince bid Rim farewell, urging him to stay safe and return alive. At dawn, Rim set out with Sambo, a handful of guards, and Haeryung. On the road, Rim watched her diligently take notes, a smile tugging at his lips, only for jealousy to strike when Byongyo offered her water and sat to chat. Rim fumed silently, his face dark with envy until Sambo handed him a bowl of cold water to calm him. At last, they reached Pyongyang. Thanks to Sambo's reminders, Rim avoided embarrassing himself before local officials. They reported that the plague had begun to ease after receiving medicine from the palace. Relieved, Rim finally relaxed. That evening, Sambo suggested visiting the seaside nearby. Rim, however, made excuses, claiming exhaustion. Rim asked Sambo to prepare his washing supplies, but when Sambo returned with the items, the prince was already gone. In truth, Rim had used official duties as an excuse to lure Haeryung outside. He wanted to take her to see the sea. Only when they arrived did Haeryung realize she had been deceived. Tired from the long journey, she complained that, unlike him, she had been walking all this time rather than riding a horse. Annoyed, she turned to leave, but Rim quickly stopped her. He confessed that since childhood he had been confined within the palace walls, and his greatest wish had always been to see the ocean, just once. More than that, he hoped he wouldn't have to see it alone. Softened by his words, Haeryung sat down beside him, kicked off her shoes, and urged him to do the same. Rim was hesitant at first, but soon gave in, chasing and laughing with her like an ordinary youth. They sat on the rocks, talking as the waves rolled in. Haeryung told him about Italy's Leaning Tower and Egypt's pyramids so tall one could not see the top from below. Rim, both envious and wistful, admitted that though he was a prince of Joseon, he hardly knew the 8 provinces of his own land. At sunset, the two finally made their way back toward the city. But at the gates, Haeryung unexpectedly encountered the man she had once nearly married. After exchanging words, she asked why he was there. Instead of answering, he requested to see the second prince. When Rim appeared, the man immediately knelt, pleading with him to save the suffering people. Puzzled, Rim pressed him for details. The man revealed the shocking truth. The situation in the disaster-stricken villages was far worse than reported. Official records sent to the court were falsified. The epidemic had already killed over 500 people in Gyeonggi province alone, with countless more infected. The medicine and grain supposedly distributed by the state had been intercepted. Some villagers starved to death while the healthy were locked away with the sick. Rim was shaken. Just that morning, officials had told him the plague was under control. Now he learned it was all lies. The man accused the local officials of hoarding relief supplies for themselves, leaving the people in despair. That night, Rim and Haeryung tried to enter the afflicted district, but soldiers blocked the roads. On the way back, they stumbled into a quarrel with merchants, and Rim was shoved aside like a helpless child. Alarmed, Haeryung quickly pulled him away. In their flight, they encountered a mother and her daughter who had escaped from the quarantined village. Hearing their account, Rim decided to confront the officials directly. But the officials coldly justified their actions, claiming that sacrificing a few hundred lives could save tens of thousands, that it was the logical choice. Rim's anger boiled over. "That is not choice," he shouted, "that is abandonment." He ordered immediate preparation of medicine and grain for relief. During distribution, Rim witnessed a woman taking pus from a cowpox sore and applying it to a child's arm. Horrified, he demanded an explanation. The woman calmly explained that cowpox served as a vaccine against smallpox, saving lives. Of the 12 children she had inoculated, 7 had recovered. The other 5 showed no improvement yet. The attending officials dismissed her methods as dangerous superstition, attributing the recoveries to chance. Rim, too, rejected her approach, forbidding her to risk the lives of the people further. But Haeryung noticed the small scar on her own arm, a mark from her childhood. She remembered she had been inoculated the same way when she was 6. The next day, she visited the mother and daughter again, only to find the child dead and the mother weeping. Deeply shaken, Haeryung sought out the woman, asking her to teach her the method. The woman handed her a medical text detailing the practice of inoculation. That night, Haeryung brought the book to Rim's quarters. She insisted that the cowpox method could truly save lives. Rim refused to believe her. In desperation, Haeryung told him of the little girl who had just died and pleaded with him. If these people are only waiting for death, why not place even a sliver of hope in this unorthodox method? After Haeryung left, Rim opened the medical text and began reading from the beginning. The next day, he went to the cowshed to meet the woman again, telling her he had finished the book. "But how can anyone be certain the contents are true?" he asked. The woman explained that the text was the result of years of painstaking notes made by her and her teacher, each line paid for with experience and sacrifice. She swore on her life that the method was effective. Rim returned, his heart heavy, and made a monumental decision. he would test the cowpox inoculation on himself. The court officials vehemently objected, horrified at the thought of a royal body being used for such an experiment. But Rim stood firm. Soon, word spread and the villagers gathered, buzzing with disbelief. How could a prince willingly subject himself to such a thing? Standing before them, Rim swallowed hard, then ordered Sambo to draw the curtain. The woman stepped forward and inoculated him with cowpox before the eyes of the crowd. No sooner had she finished than shadowy figures appeared at her door, forcing her to flee for her life. Meanwhile, Rim collapsed in illness. Soldiers cordoned off the residence in panic. For 2 days he lay unconscious, tended carefully by Haryung. At last he opened his eyes. Sambo rushed in with a physician, relief written on his face. When the doctor examined Rim's arm, he found the blisters were not worsening, but fading, proof that recovery had begun. The treatment worked. Rim then commanded that the cowpox method be offered to the people. At first, the villagers hesitated in fear. Sambo urged Rim to reassure them personally, and so the prince lifted his sleeve, showing his healing arm. His gesture inspired them, and one by one they stepped forward. Though the effort left him drained, Rim endured, until at last Sambo brought him food. Sending his servant away, Rim wrapped a portion of the meal and carried it to Haryung as a gift. When she opened it, he bashfully admitted, "You must have been worried these past days. You've even grown thin." But Haryung only laughed, saying she had eaten well and slept soundly while he was ill. Stung by her indifference, Rim turned away in frustration, muttering that she must not have cared for him at all, before storming off like a sulking child. Later, Haryung found Rim and Sambo struggling awkwardly to feed children in the village. Unable to watch, she took over, sending the 2 men to light the cooking fire. They failed miserably. By evening, however, the children brought them bundles of mugwort steamed buns they had made from scarce ingredients. Touched, Rim tasted one and smiled. The next morning, the villagers gathered to see him off, their faces filled with gratitude. Rim was deeply moved. Upon his return to the palace, he saw the king waiting. Joyfully, he bowed and greeted his father, only to receive a harsh slap across the face. Rim had thought he had done something noble, but instead, his actions enraged the court. News of his experiment reached the ministers, who accused him of disgracing the royal body by injecting filth into himself. They demanded prohibition of the cowpox practice. The king, furious, ordered Rim back to the palace and forbade further inoculations. Before the entire court, the king struck him again, condemning his weakness and reckless behavior. He prepared to punish him further, but the crown prince intervened, kneeling and begging for mercy on his younger brother's behalf. The king grew even angrier, telling the crown prince not to interfere. From afar, the queen dowager had witnessed it all. When Rim returned to the green pavilion, she was waiting. She praised him warmly for his courage, though warned him that the king would not forgive easily. Taking his hand tenderly, she offered him his favorite sweets, but Rim declined. Instead, he requested permission to leave the palace and live quietly outside its walls. Meanwhile, back at the office, Byongyo reminded Haryung that, as a historian, she was duty-bound to record everything she had seen and heard truthfully. Later, when Byongyo returned home, he found his father, the left state councillor, drinking. The minister welcomed his son's safe return and urged him to resign as historian, to instead pursue a stable path as a government scholar. But Byongyo resisted. "Being your son is already my greatest flaw," he said bitterly. His father, stung, asked if he still resented the past. Without answering, Byongyo stood and left. One morning, Rim awoke to find Haryung lying right beside him. Startled, he froze, not daring to move. Slowly, he tried to pull his arm back, but in her sleep, Haryung rolled into his embrace. The night before, on his way back from the library, Rim had run into Haryung. When he asked why she was awake so late, she explained it was her night duty as a historian, meaning she was forbidden from sleeping. Rim smiled and suggested they keep each other company. He led her to a quiet pavilion, where the two sat reading by lamplight. Rim found himself stealing glances at her again and again, only to quickly bury himself in his book whenever she noticed. Little did he know, Haryung was doing the same. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her. She walked over, gently took the book from Irim's hands, and gazed at his sleeping face. Her fingers hovered in the air, as if sketching his features, before she too drifted off. By morning, they had unconsciously fallen asleep side by side. When voices approached, Irim panicked. He tried to wake her quietly, but Haeryung jumped up like a startled rabbit, fumbling with her shoes and rushing to escape. At that very moment, Sambo and a court lady appeared, catching her red-handed. Embarrassed, Haeryung darted away to hide. Sambo turned to Irim, exasperated. "If you must do such things, at least choose a better place. This is humiliating." Irim, however, seemed lost in a daze, murmuring about the lingering fragrance on his arm and chest. Later, Irim confessed everything to Sambo, even asking him to replay the night in detail. Blushing, he wondered aloud if Haeryung might have feelings for him. Sambo, eager and full of ideas, offered to help him win her heart sincerely. To his surprise, Irim took the offer seriously and asked for advice. Soon after, Haeryung was summoned. She entered, confused, only for Irim to rise and slowly approach her. Step by step, he backed her against the wall. Just as he leaned in, Haeryung pushed him away sharply, glaring at him with fierce eyes. "About last night, I apologize. But don't lecture me with such strange behavior. It's too embarrassing." She fled, leaving Irim flustered and silently cursing Sambo's advice. He ran after her, calling her name, and when he caught up, he tried desperately to explain himself. Haeryung thought he was about to confess. Confused and annoyed, she left him standing there. Meanwhile, in the crown prince's quarters, tensions flared. Princess Consort had barged in unannounced, accusing her husband of neglect. For 15 years, she said, he had used state affairs as an excuse, never once spending their conjugal night together. Tears welled in her eyes as she cried that she had endured shame and ridicule as a barren woman, all while he had failed to protect her. The crown prince apologized, but she cut him off bitterly. "I no longer want empty words. Next month, on the appointed night, you must come to me. If you don't, I'll walk into the street and choose any man to give me a child." Faced with her desperation, the crown prince could only sigh in silence. The matter quickly reached the Office of Records. The female historians who had witnessed the quarrel debated whether to include such an unprecedented scandal in the annals. Unsure, they sought guidance from their superiors, who in turn passed the burden back to them. When the crown prince himself came to the office, he urged Byung-yo to erase the incident for the sake of the princess consort's dignity. But Byung-yo, upright and unyielding, refused outright. The crown prince summoned the 4 female historians from the Office of Records. At first, they braced themselves for scolding or punishment. To their surprise, he did not rebuke them. Instead, he praised them for their fairness and integrity, rewarding them and even granting them a day of rest. Later, the crown prince sought out his younger brother Irim. With a knowing smile, he told him not to worry that the ladies might record anything that day. He had sent them to the Western Valley for leisure. At the mention of that place, Irim froze. The Western Valley was a well-known spot where noblemen often bathed. The thought of Haeryung among them made his heart tighten with jealousy. In his mind, he imagined her laughing with other young men, and the idea drove him restless. Meanwhile, Haeryung was in truth enjoying a quiet picnic with her fellow historians. When they realized they had forgotten charcoal, she volunteered to gather firewood. As she collected branches, sudden rain poured down. She tried to wait it out beneath a tree, but soon decided to rejoin her companions. Just as she stepped into the rain, a robe was draped over her head. Startled, she looked up. Irim stood there, shielding her from the storm. They took shelter beneath a rocky ledge. For the first time, Irim found the courage to reach for her hand. Haeryung, blushing, let him hold it. His heart soared. Yet before they could leave, her fellow historians arrived. Flustered, Haeryung pushed Irim aside and pretended to be searching for something she had lost. After sending her colleagues away, she pulled Irim back from hiding. Once again, she offered her hand, and he grasped it tightly, his earlier hurt forgotten. But when her playful teasing pierced too close to his true feelings, Irim grew embarrassed and fled. Back in his chambers, he replayed the memory of her hand in his again and again. Excited, he confided in Sambo, asking whether Haryung might truly like him. Sambo, ever ready, offered theories and strategies. The next day, Rim resolved to see her. He went to the Office of Records, only to find her with Byung-yo, laughing and talking with ease. Sambo whispered that he should play hard to get, but Rim ignored him, striding forward and demanding that Haryung follow him. Byung-yo, however, stepped in and stopped him. The very day after his failed confession, Haryung was thrown into prison. She had overheard the king discussing a grave secret and had been caught by patrolling guards. When questioned, she clutched her record book tightly. The king demanded to see what she had written, but she stood firm, declaring that even the king had no right to inspect the historian's records. Enraged by her defiance, the king ordered her imprisoned. When Rim heard the news, he panicked. He donned official robes, intending to plead for her release. Sambo tried desperately to stop him, reminding him that he was already unloved by the court. If he intervened for a mere female historian, he would only doom himself as well. For a moment, Rim stilled. Yet the thought of Haryung facing execution made him tremble with fear. "No matter what, I must save her," he declared, only to be physically restrained by Sambo, who clung to his leg. Meanwhile, the king seized the opportunity to tighten his grip on the Office of Records. Under the pretext of inspecting the historian's work, he ordered officials to seize all record books. Armed guards stormed the office with force, demanding compliance. But the historians stood their ground. With unwavering resolve, they invoked the law, that the annals belonged to history, not to the throne. They refused to surrender even a single page, for within those books lay the record of the king's own failings. If they yielded now, it would set a dangerous precedent, that the truth itself could be erased at the king's whim. Even though they were beaten badly, they still refused to hand over the books, holding their ground inside the Office of Records. That night, Rim secretly slipped into the prison. He brought food, clothes, and even a pouch of silver for Haryung. Gently, he told her not to be afraid, he would find a way to get her out. But Haryung only gave him a faint smile. "I have offended the king himself," she said. "Locked in the Justice Ministry's prison, my fate will be either exile or death." Rim clenched his fists. "Then whatever happens, I will be with you. If you are dismissed from service, I'll leave the palace as well." For the first time, Rim found the courage to lean forward, ready to kiss her. But just then, Sambo barged in, ruining the moment. Rim stammered, pretending he had only been testing Haryung's alertness. Sambo urged him to leave quickly before the guards returned. Disappointed, Rim rose to go. Yet before he left, Haryung reached out suddenly and brushed a kiss against his cheek. Rim stumbled out into the night, heart racing, unable to recover from the shock. Meanwhile, Haryung sat quietly in her cell, looking at the small meal he had prepared for her, her heart secretly warmed. The next morning, the female historians marched to the palace, led by Byung-yo. Carrying an axe, he knelt before the king's hall and declared, "If your majesty insists on seizing the records, then strike me down first." The king's face twisted with fury. For centuries, the throne has been shackled by the pens of historians. Who can say if your records are even truthful? I merely wish to see if you have done your work properly. In his rage, he seized the axe himself and raised it high, only to be restrained by his ministers. When he tried again, even the palace attendants threw themselves forward, begging him to withdraw his order. The king trembled with rage, but at last, under their pressure, he relented. Soon after, Haryung was released. Rim, who had been lifeless since returning from the prison, suddenly came alive. The moment he heard she was free, he dismissed his attendants and laughed to himself, determined to sleep well that night so that he could appear bright and handsome before her the next day. Yet the king, still brooding over his humiliation, could not let the matter go. At dawn, he summoned Haryung to court again. Not only her, but even the queen and the dowager were dragged to the royal hall. The dowager, who had long stood against the king, deliberately kept him waiting, slowly finishing her writing before permitting him entry. Smiling coldly, she accepted his sudden proposal that he would henceforth visit her every morning. The king realized too late that he had trapped himself, forced into a routine he despised. Afterward, he dismissed the others but kept Haeryung behind. All morning, he made her stand and record his every action. Even at meals, he gorged himself on food solely to make her hand cramp from writing faster. When his gluttony left him with stomach pains, he rushed out with his attendants to relieve himself, but even then, he forced Haeryung to follow, recording every detail. More outrageously still, he ordered her to deliver his waste to the royal physicians for inspection. Exhausted and humiliated, Haeryung returned to the Office of Records. Her colleagues told her quietly that this was not mere punishment, it was the king's way of asserting dominance over the historians, of wearing them down until they bent to his will. And so, each day, before dawn had even broken, Haeryung was summoned again, forced to follow the king's endless routines until she could barely stand. The king, resentful and petty, seemed determined to make her suffer. Haeryung's grueling days left her so exhausted that even in the council chamber she struggled to keep her eyes open. Yet, no matter how weary she became, she still appeared punctually each morning to await the king's rise. At last, the king himself faltered. Unable to outlast her resolve, he summoned Haeryung privately. To her surprise, he suggested a truce. But Haeryung stood firm. "I will continue to fulfill my duty as a historian," she said calmly. Frustrated, the king realized he had met his match. He reluctantly asked her to name her terms. With quiet determination, Haeryung secured a written pledge from the king himself. He would no longer interfere in the affairs of the Office of Records. That evening, her colleagues held a feast in celebration of her victory. As they drank and laughed together, Irim appeared, hovering in the shadows, watching her with an unguarded smile. One of the male historians spotted him and called out teasingly, "When did you become so interested in us?" Recognizing him from the days when he had disguised himself as a servant in their office, they warmly invited him to join. Haeryung panicked, darting anxious glances at Pyongyang, who alone knew Irim's true identity. But it was too late. Irim had already stepped into the light. He drank cup after cup, his colleagues urging him on, while Haeryung secretly worried and quietly slipped water into his hands whenever she could. By the time the feast ended, it was Irim who supported a tipsy Haeryung back to his quarters. But while looking around the room, Haeryung's eyes fell upon a folded letter tucked carelessly away. Curiosity pricked her heart. She opened it and froze. It was a love letter, written long ago, addressed to her. The words revealed Irim's feelings, hidden from the start. When Irim returned, holding the soup for her, she sat silently, watching him with unreadable eyes. Concerned, he asked, "Are you unwell?" Instead of replying, Haeryung pulled out the letter. Before he could react, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The next morning, Irim awoke as though reborn, his heart so light that he saw Haeryung's reflection even in the water he used to wash his face. As for Haeryung, who usually loved to sleep in, she rose early, dressed with care, and went straight to meet him. At the green pavilion, she found Irim sitting awkwardly outside. "What are you doing here?" she asked, amused. He turned, startled by her beauty, and nearly fled inside. But she caught his arm and teased, "What? Do you think I'll eat you alive?" Irim flushed crimson at her boldness. Their romance blossomed swiftly, but joy was soon shadowed by duty. News spread that the court was preparing the crown prince's coming-of-age ceremony, and the king wished to arrange marriages for the remaining princes. Only Irim was yet unmarried. Haeryung overheard the conversation by chance. Her heart twisted painfully. Stay, Irim swore to her, "I will never marry anyone else," but Haeryung shook her head. "I have no wish to live my life confined to the women's quarters as a consort," she said softly, leaving him torn. Determined, Irim dragged her to the dowager's residence. Kneeling, he declared, "Please rescind the king's order. I already have the woman I love. I want no other." Haeryung, recording their exchange with trembling hands, felt her heart ache. The dowager, though sympathetic, refused. "You are a prince. Your marriage is not merely your choice." Irim stormed out, furious, while Haeryung pretended calm, though her silence cut Irim deeper than words. Soon after, the palace prepared for the bride selection. As a historian, Haryung was ordered to record the proceedings. Watching the dowager's approving gaze fall upon a young noblewoman, her chest tightened painfully. Rim, too, grew silent, but then a scandal erupted. The powerful left state councillor had manipulated the process, ensuring his ally, Lady Song, was placed among the candidates. What he did not know, however, was that Lady Song harbored a secret love for the Crown Prince Jin. Upon learning that she was fated to be wed to Rim, Lady Song resolved to see the Crown Prince one last time. At dawn, she slipped out from the Eastern Palace, only to be spotted by 2 young court maids. The news traveled swiftly, reaching the ears of the dowager. The dowager was secretly delighted when rumors spread of Lady Song's meeting with the Crown Prince. With such a scandal clouding her name, Lady Song could no longer be considered as a bride, and Rim's marriage was postponed. To comfort her grandson, the dowager assured Rim that another bride would soon be chosen. But this time, Rim stood his ground. "I do not wish to marry," he declared firmly. Sambo, fearing his master was slipping into melancholy, nearly talked himself hoarse before persuading Rim to leave the palace for some fresh air. Reading his master's heart clearly, Sambo led him to a quiet residence. "Even ordinary couples would live happily here," he remarked. Rim closed his eyes, and in an instant he imagined a different life. The vision struck him so deeply that he made a decision on the spot. He ran to her home and pounded on the gate. When Haryung opened the door, Rim blurted out his feelings. But she cut him off with cold words. "You must return to the palace." She could not allow him to abandon his birthright for her sake. Hardening her heart, she forced out words meant to wound. "You and I can never be." Rim staggered back, shattered. Fate, however, would not keep them apart. On Rim's birthday, Sambo arranged a small surprise, hoping to lift his master's spirits. For the first time in days, Rim smiled and ate. Yet just as Sambo relaxed, messengers from the dowager arrived, summoning Rim to perform rites for the late king. Though puzzled, Rim obeyed. The king was alarmed upon hearing this. "No one must know, especially not the left councillor," he ordered. But the news had already reached the councillor's ears. That night, Rim dreamed of the late king calling his name with gentle affection. The next day, as he returned to the palace with Haryung at his side, assassin struck. Rim shielded her and was struck by an arrow in the back. Though the wound was not grave, the danger was clear. Someone wanted him dead. The crown prince hurried to his brother's side, shaken. "Who would dare target you?" he asked, bewildered, for Rim had never been considered a threat. Meanwhile, Haryung noticed her brother concealing secrets of his own. Together, they visited the very place Rim had seen in his dream. Inside, they discovered a portrait of the late king. Both stood frozen, realization dawning. Outside, Rim asked quietly, "How do you know the late king?" At last, Haryung revealed her past. 20 years ago, my father was branded a traitor and executed. The man you know as my brother was then only his loyal disciple. To save me, he smuggled me out of the capital. I grew up in hiding, always searching for the truth. I remember the late king. He was close to my father. If that bond was so strong, why was my father destroyed as a rebel? Rim, equally unsettled, resolved to confront his own father. In the palace, the dowager cornered the king in fury. "Did you intend Rim's death? If he falls, I will end my own life, and your name will forever be cursed as a king who murdered his son." Meanwhile, Rim searched the archives of the Office of Records. To his horror, no birth record existed for him at all. The next day, he demanded an audience with the king. At first refused, he waited until nightfall when the king finally emerged. "Tell me," Rim cried, trembling, "for 20 years I have wondered, who am I truly?" That confrontation sparked the unraveling of a buried past. On the night of Rim's birth, the left state councillor had led a coup with the then prince, who would later become king. The late king, unprepared, was overthrown within hours. Holding forged evidence of heresy, the councillor accused the sovereign of endangering the realm and demanded he confess. But the late king refused. The councillor silenced him with a blade through the heart. All who had supported the late king were executed as traitors. When she was only 6, Haeryung lost her father to the purge. At that same time, the newborn Irim was taken from his mother and confined to Noxiadang for 20 long years. Now the truth had finally come to light. Those who had once remained loyal to the late king stood behind Irim. They revealed the evidence, the letters forged by the left state councillor to frame the late king as a heretic. With proof in hand, Irim petitioned the throne to punish the councillor, who for decades had imperiled the royal family. But the councillor still held his greatest weapon, the very king whom he himself had placed on the throne. When officials questioned him, he silenced them with threats. Even when the dowager rose and declared, "If you condemn these loyal men, then take this old woman's life first," the councillor sneered and dared her to resist. At that moment, Irim strode into the hall. The king, trembling with guilt, barked at him to leave at once. But Irim stood firm. "I am no longer your hidden son, locked away in Noxiading. I will not be silent." Furious, the king ordered the court historians to put down their brushes. Yet none obeyed. Enraged, he shouted that those who refused would be executed. It was then that Haeryung stepped forward. "Even if your majesty were to kill every historian in this land, you will never silence the truth." Her courage moved the others, and one by one, the historians stood at her side. Still, the councillor urged the king to cut them all down. But the crown prince spoke at last. "It was the councillor who plotted against our late father. It is he who threatens this dynasty, not my brother, not the historians. Clear the late king's name. Restore Irim to his rightful place." The tide of the court turned. With evidence and voices united, Irim's claim could not be denied. Yet Irim did not seek the throne. He went to the dowager and bowed deeply. "Strip me of the title of Grand Prince. I never desired power. I wish only to live as an ordinary man." After the councillor's fall, his daughter was spared from a forced royal marriage, and Irim disappeared from the palace, leaving governance to the crown prince. Though the dowager fumed at her grandson's cowardly escape, she secretly softened each time she heard he was living well. And so Irim cast aside crowns and burdens alike, devoting himself to Haeryung. The once lonely prince became a devoted lover, gentle, playful, waiting each day for her return. Every morning he rose before her, whispering her awake with a smile. And every evening, though weary from her duties, Haeryung never forgot to press a kiss to his lips before rushing out again. At last, Irim had found the life he had always longed for, not as a hidden prince, but simply as a man who loved and was loved in return.
The echoes call, 1,000 dreams begin to fall, and it's over, it's over. The curtains drawn, the story fades, but the feeling's strong.
Korean Netflix like, comment, and subscribe.